Video is going to be looking at the rebellion of Vindex, which was probably one of the most serious rebellions that Nero had to deal with during his reign. And you can see it's a section of Casasdio, a coin, and also a section of Suetonia. So this beginning section of Casasdio points out that Nero was suffering quite a few different rebellions and uprisings at this time. So there's the Jews in Jerusalem, there's also issues in Britain, and then obviously there's this particular one that is in Gaul. And he kind of points out that a lot of it's to do with taxation. So obviously after the fire of Rome, etc., he's having to rebuild, needs to raise taxes, whatever. So we have Gaius Julius Vindex, okay, and he is within the senatorial class. So remember, Julius Caesar had allowed citizenship to some Gauls and allowed them to the Senate. So this is why, the fact that he's from Gaul and why he's a senator, that kind of makes that link. Not as particularly relevant, but just thought I'd explain why he's able to be a senator. So he has a passionate freedom of love, of freedom, and that's kind of the key to his whole rebellion, as we'll look at in one of the coin later. So Vindex summoned the people of Gaul to a meeting. I doubt he summoned everybody of Gaul. That sounds a bit weird, but key people in Gaul. They were suffering. Obviously, clearly, Nero's provincial management wasn't going very well. There's lots of taxes being imposed upon them. So Vindex gives a really long speech and urges them to rebel. So this could potentially be incredibly serious. And he gives the key reason here, two key reasons, He's plundered the whole Roman world, which we know, obviously, Nero was doing. He was taking lots of gold and silver from temples, etc., putting up taxes, trying to find money to build pretty stuff. And also, he has destroyed the full flower of their Senate. A bit of a weird sentence. But basically, he's destroyed the power of the Senate. So when we're looking at Nero's relationship with the Senate, you could also see link to this particular source. He also says that he had committed incest and then killed his mother, as Agrippina, and nobody's done anything about it. So he says, loads of people have done horrible things. There have been loads of killings and lootings by everybody. But, what about these crimes by Nero? How could anyone do justice in words? So he's kind of gone beyond even the previous terrible behaviour, not even just by the emperors, but under the Roman system into the Republic as well. So look how awful he is compared to everybody else. So he gives a few sort of examples, which we don't really need to worry about too much. But the fact he sort of, plays in the theatre and the orchestra, etc., that he's wearing high-heeled shoes and a mask, and, each to their own. The fact he's singing, he's acting, seen him bound in chains, I've seen him dragged along by force pregnant, as in pretending to be pregnant, and would you believe even giving birth. So clearly this is not like typical behaviour of a Roman emperor, and this is the problem. He has clearly the provinces and the provincials have no respect for him, and they believe he is this tyrannical leader causing all these problems. So basically they want to get rid of him. Is there anyone then who would call him such a man Caesar, Imperator and Augustus? No, never. No one must ever abuse those sacred titles. So it kind of shows that Augustus and Claudius were really well respected in the provinces, which is not a surprise because they treated them really well. While Nero, on the other hand, because his behaviour is so kind of beyond everybody else's, he has lost the respect from the provincials. Okay, fine. So now, therefore, it's time to rise up against him, liberate the whole world. And it's this kind of freedom and liberation is behind the Vindex rebellion. It doesn't seem to be about Vindex trying to take power for himself. It is more about this belief of trying to ensure freedom for people living in the empire, which is obviously the case that Cassius Dio puts forward. So it's not that he was seeking supreme power for himself, and actually he supported this guy, Servius Sulpicius, Galba. We'll talk about Galba in another video. Galba was governor of Spain and had a military force behind him. So it would appear that he's going to be the surer. So he's trying to kind of lay the groundwork, I guess, in preparation, maybe to help Galba seize power at some point. So then we have that actually the rebellion then starts. So we have Rufus, the governor of Germany, launches an expedition to attack Vindex. So he's sent to deal with it. Fine. So he starts to besiege this particular city. Vindex comes to the aid of the city and encamps a short distance away. It's not particularly exciting, but to be honest. They then have a meeting in private, and then they join up together to oppose Nero. So he manages to win over the governor of Germany. So this is where the conspiracy could get... Well, conspiracy? No, rebellion becomes really serious, because now you've got Gaul and now you've got Germany, and in theory you've got Galba up here in Spain as well. So this is this could very easily get completely out of hand, and Nero could obviously lose his power. So then Vindex sets out with his army to take control of the town. Rufus's troops see him approaching, but because it's been a secret meeting, they don't know that these two have teamed up, so then they attack them, which isn't very good. Vindex's soldiers aren't ready for the attack, understandably, and they're killed. So as a result, what he sees is Vindex is really upset, and then he takes his own life. And that is, to be completely honest, kind of the end of the Vindex rebellion. But like I said, the potential was there to be very serious. So Rufus is upset about the death, because obviously that wasn't the aim. But he also refuses to take position of emperor, even though his troops are urging him. So the idea that, you remember, you think about Claudius and other emperors, my mind's gone a bit blank now, particularly Claudius, having the army behind you is key. So obviously the Praetorian Guard and the rest of the army had sworn allegiance to Claudius, and that had ensured his position. So now part of the army is throwing its weight behind someone like Rufus, but he decides not to take advantage of this particular situation. So his soldiers start destroying images of Nero. They also start kind of inscribing the words on his standard, which is like calling Rufus Caesar and Augustus. Rufus takes the words off. And eventually he manages to get the army back under control and persuades them to refer the matter to the Senate and the people. So that's very interesting, because obviously Rufus and others see that it's the Senate and the people that should have the power. The supreme power, sorry, not necessarily the emperor. And that kind of shows you how unpopular Nero as emperor had become. So that last little bit of the source isn't particularly helpful. We do have the idea that Nero hears about the Vindex after lunch. Thanks for the detail, Cassidy. And he's in Greece, I think, near Palos, from memory. I'm pretty certain it's in Greece. And he's watching some gymnastics, typical Nero behaviour. He's not disturbed at all. He actually starts to take part in the athletics. Of course he did. And he doesn't go back to Rome, but sends a letter saying, I can't come because I've got a sore throat. So he doesn't seem particularly bothered about it at all. Is that, if we think back to the video we watched about Nero, the overview from Tony Robinson, is it about the fact that he was kind of paralysed with fear and didn't know what to do? Or is it, as Cassidy points out, he just didn't seem to particularly care? It's dealt with, it's done, it's over. What difference is it going to make to me? Down to interpretation, I guess. So we have this coin that that Vindex had minted himself. So we have victory standing, which is on the globe. Importantly, it says salvation of the human race. So this kind of shows how Vindex saw his rebellion as the sort of the creating freedom and saving the people from Nero. I forgot his name for a second then. And he's also showing that he believes that the Senate and the people, hence the SPQR, so that's kind of like the Senate and the people of Rome, Roman Republic, as it were. He believes they should be the ones with the power. He's not necessarily saying there should be no emperors, just there should not be Nero. And by getting rid of Nero, we would have freedom. And that's what this coin is pointing out. So this gives you a really good idea of how Vindex saw his own rebellion. It's not about him, because he's not on the coin. He's just about trying to win freedom for everybody. Which is nice. We then have Suetonius with his version of the same story, because you know the example likes to give you more than one source on anything. So we have the idea that there's some omens and sort of like prophecies going around about Nero's reign. So you've got this astrologer told him one day he'd be removed from the throne. Well, they weren't wrong, because he was eventually. Some astrologers forecasted forced through Rome he'd find another throne in the east. Not true. Others assured him he would recoup all his losses. Prediction became home hopeful when he seemed to have lost the province of Britain of Armenia, but managed to regain them both. So obviously we will look at, or have looked at by the time we've watched this video, the rebellions in Britain and Armenia, and also in Jerusalem as well. So he sort of manages to take hold of these places, and as a result this become a little bit kind of blasé and arrogant about it. Yeah, possibly. So we've got Nero hears of Vindex's revolt on the anniversary of his mother's murder. Fascinating detail. And he takes it he uses it as an excuse to strip provinces clean, i.e. take lots of money out of them, take all the gold and the silver and everything else, because, you know, rules of war, teeth back in. But beyond that, he doesn't really sort of do anything. He sort of sits around for 8 days watching some gymnastics and kind of tries to, in fact we'll highlight that, trying to ignore the whole affair, which fits in with this idea that he's just maybe paralysed with fear, or just doesn't understand maybe the true magnitude of what could have happened here. What we do have is some edicts assigned by Vindex in his province, and he sends them sort of out to the Senate, which is quite interesting, in the urge to avenge himself and Rome's. Obviously, at that point, Vindex would have known. Sorry, let me reread that again. So he signs out the edicts, and then Nero writes a letter to the Senate where he urges them to avenge him against Vindex and the others in Rome. But then, same story about having an infected throat, about reason not going. People start calling him his original name because they don't like him, which is what this is basically going on about Vindex again. So eventually, there's a load of dispatches are sent out to him when it appears that the sort of rebellion is not being put down as quickly as he may have hoped, and that's when he hurries back to Rome in a state of terror. But he makes a couple of big mistakes. So he arrives in the city but neglects to speak to the Senate or the people, and instead he summons some really important people to this palace where he kind of discusses the issues in Gaul, and then he starts talking about a new water organ and other things. So it kind of shows his kind of lack of grip of reality of the situation he's found himself in. So he's kind of thinking, well, Vindex is gone, so I don't have to worry anymore. It's all absolutely fine. So I'm just watching a cat out the window. It's all fine. So it's all good. I can talk about a water organ because it's far more interesting things to talk about than the Gallic rebellion. But obviously, he's wrong. And there's going to be another rebellion led by Galba.